Hello, dear listeners. I invite you to hear a story about how, on New Year's Day, the whole family set off for a barbecue. My mother-in-law said there was no room in the car, and I silently went back to pack my things and leave. But when everyone returned home from the picnic, the truth made me freeze on the spot. The haze of festive cooking at the start of the year was thick. It constricted my chest. The wooden door slammed shut, leaving me alone with a mountain of cold dishes. The thread of patience, stretched taut throughout the year, finally snapped with a crack. When people's hearts are colder than the January wind, what will a submissive woman do to turn the tables in this cruel game? For 5 years, I had been a daughter-in-law in a new family, always remembering one word: patience. There's an old saying, give an inch, and they'll take a mile. I believed that my sacrifices and compliance would bring me a peaceful family, my husband's full love, and my mother-in-law's respect. But on the morning of January 1st this year, the truth that confronted me was colder and more ruthless than the January weather itself. In my upscale Chicago condo, where my husband's entire family had been staying for the past year, the morning was filled with noise and commotion from the very start. Today was a beautiful day, and my mother-in-law had the idea for everyone to go out to a state park for a barbecue to have a change of scenery after several days of holiday leftovers. From 5 a.m., I was already up and bustling in the kitchen. I marinated the ribs, washed the vegetables, peeled every onion and clove of garlic, and prepared a large cooler with ice to chill drinks for the whole family. Everything I did was flawless, neat, with nothing to criticize. My hands deftly sliced thin strips of beef for skewers, marinating them carefully in spices to perfectly match the refined tastes of my mother-in-law and my husband's younger brother's family. By 6:30, their whole family began to gather in the living room. My mother-in-law, Helen, was dressed in a bright red, stylish blouse. A pearl necklace sparkled around her neck. It was a gift I had bought her with my own money for her birthday last year. My husband, Michael's younger brother, Paul, and his young wife, Jessica, were dressed in fashionable outfits. In Jessica's hand was a designer handbag that Michael himself had given her on the occasion of her son's birth. My husband, Michael, had styled his hair with gel, doused himself in expensive cologne, and was wearing a pricey tracksuit. They stood around, laughing and chatting loudly, discussing where they would take beautiful photos and how they would grill the meat. No one even glanced into the kitchen, where I, drenched in sweat, was working tirelessly. No one asked if I had finished the preparations or if I needed help. I carried the heavy cooler out, placed it by the front door, quickly wiped the sweat from my forehead, and with a slight smile, said to my mother-in-law, "Mom, I've prepared everything. Just give me 5 minutes. I'll just change, and we can go." Helen, who was admiring herself in the mirror, turned sharply upon hearing my words. Her face suddenly darkened. She glanced out the window at the car parked in the condominium's lot, then at Paul and his wife, and finally, her cold gaze settled on me. "Paul's SUV is tight. 4 adults, and all this stuff will be a squeeze. Clara, you should stay home today. Look after the apartment. It's the 1st of the month. Clean up the house, do the dishes, wash all the bed linens and towels. It's too much trouble to be so cramped on the drive." I was stunned. The cooler of food that I had just prepared stood at my feet, a silent testament to the futility of my morning's efforts. I looked up at Michael, the man I shared a bed with, hoping he would say a word in my defense. Just yesterday, when we were discussing it, Michael himself had said that the 5 of us would fit comfortably in one car. And obviously, I had made all these preparations to go with everyone. But Michael avoided my gaze. He bent down to adjust a crease in his pants and, clicking his tongue, replied to his mother in a carefree tone, "Mom's right, Clara. You stay home. It'll be more convenient. It's crowded, and you might get carsick. You'll get tired. Just clean the apartment, and then you can rest. We'll be back in the evening. I'll buy you a pizza." Michael's words flowed smoothly, without the slightest hint of embarrassment. Paul and his wife, standing nearby, even covered their mouths to hide their smirks. Jessica stroked her handbag and added in a shrill, grating voice, "Clara, dear, when you're cleaning, don't forget to wipe down the glass cabinet in the living room. Our little one got his handprints all over it yesterday. It's cool in the house. Take your time, do everything calmly." I stood there, rooted to the spot. They had absolutely no regard for my feelings. They treated me like a free servant, a maid who had done her prep work and was then cast aside so they could enjoy their lives freely. Over the past 5 years, such humiliating and oppressive scenes had become commonplace. Sometimes I had to deny myself tasty food to leave it for my husband and his brother. Sometimes I had to give my entire salary to my mother-in-law for managing the big family affairs. Sometimes I had to hide the fact that this upscale condo was my personal property to save my husband's family's face in front of relatives from Gary, Indiana. But today, at the very beginning of the new year, this humiliation reached the limit of my patience. Strangely, I didn't cry. My eyes were dry. I didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't utter a single word of reproach. My heart, which had been worn down by their coldness and indifference over the years, finally turned to ice in that moment, the last straw. It fell without a loud splash, but it was enough to shatter all illusions of a warm family. I nodded. My voice was so calm it surprised me. "All right, have a fun time." My mother-in-law seemed very pleased with my obedience and submissiveness. She proudly picked up her bag and walked out the door. Michael carried the cooler of food. Paul and his wife followed them. The heavy oak door slammed shut. Their laughter and conversation faded down the hallway. I was left alone in the huge apartment, amidst a mountain of dirty dishes from breakfast and the lingering smell of grease in the air. I slowly walked to the window and looked down at the spacious courtyard of the residential complex. Paul's SUV slowly pulled away, merging into the sparse traffic of January 1st. They were gone. They had left me in my own home, treating me like a freeloader, a servant. They had no idea that the moment their car started moving, I decided to single-handedly put an end to these pathetic days of endurance. I spun around and walked to the kitchen. I didn't wash a single plate. I threw the rubber gloves straight into the trash. The revenge plans I had secretly nurtured, the evidence I had painstakingly collected over the last 3 years, it was time to bring them to light. I took a deep breath, feeling a powerful surge of life force fill my chest. The best revenge is not scandals or loud accusations. The best revenge is to strip them of everything they delusively considered theirs, to put them in their rightful place, and to walk away with my head held high. I went straight to the bedroom and opened the closet. Today, I would no longer be the spineless wife and obedient daughter-in-law. Today, I would be myself again, Clara Miller, the only daughter of John Miller. I took off the old house clothes, saturated with the smell of food. I chose an elegant black dress and threw a gray cashmere coat over it. These were expensive things I had bought before my marriage, but my mother-in-law had forced me to hide them at the bottom of the closet, calling them city slicker nonsense and wasteful. I sat down at the vanity table, carefully applied cherry red lipstick, and brushed my long black hair, letting it fall down my back. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I saw a sophisticated, calm, and resolute woman. The traces of submissiveness and humiliation had completely vanished. I picked up my leather handbag, put my phone and a set of car keys in it. My personal car, a gift from my father for my college graduation, was always parked obediently in the underground garage. My husband's family didn't know the car was registered in my name. I always said I had borrowed it from a friend so that my mother-in-law wouldn't try to claim it to show off to her relatives in Indiana. Leaving the apartment, I ran into my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, who was taking out her trash. Mrs. Davis had lived in the building for a long time. She was a straightforward woman, but very curious about other people's business. Usually, when she saw me bent under the weight of grocery bags or mopping the common hallway floor, she would shake her head sympathetically. Today, seeing me in nice clothes and with bright makeup, her eyes widened in surprise. "Clara, is that you? Where are you all dressed up to go on New Year's Day? The whole family left for a barbecue, and they left you all alone." I just saw Helen with Paul and his wife. They were going downstairs so cheerfully. I maintained a polite expression and smiled reservedly at the elderly woman. "Yes, Mrs. Davis, something urgent came up. I have to go. Happy New Year to you. I wish you health and peace." With that, I gave the neighbor a polite nod and headed straight for the elevator. I no longer needed to explain anything. From now on, I would not live my life looking over my shoulder at other people's opinions or gossip. Down in the parking garage, I got behind the wheel. The familiar smell of the leather interior enveloped me, giving me a sense of security and control. I started the engine, and the car smoothly exited the garage, merging into the flow of traffic on the still holiday quiet streets. The weather in Chicago today was cool, but the New Year's lights still twinkled on the trees along the roads. I lowered the window slightly to let in the fresh January air. My mind was crystal clear. My destination was an impressive office building in the heart of the city. The basement of this building housed a system of private vaults and bank-safe deposit boxes of international standard. The security system here was incredibly strict, with absolute client confidentiality. 3 years ago, after I accidentally discovered my mother-in-law rummaging through my dresser drawer looking for my wedding jewelry, I became wary. I realized that the people living under my roof possessed a bottomless greed. They were always looking for an opportunity to grab something, to cheat even their closest relatives. The very next day, I came here and signed a 10-year lease for a medium-sized safe deposit box. This box became my last citadel, protecting what was mine. After parking the car, I took the elevator down to the security zone. A security officer in a sharp black suit greeted me politely. I presented my ID and a special client card. After passing through 3 levels of access control, including a fingerprint scan and a retinal scanner, I was escorted to a private room so quiet you could hear your own breathing. The officer left me alone in the room with safe deposit box number 89. I entered the 8-digit code, my father's date of birth. There was a dry click, and the heavy, solid steel door of the box swung open. Inside was everything most important in my life, things my husband's family couldn't even guess existed. I carefully removed a brown leather document folder from the box. Placing it on the table, I slowly untied the ribbon. Neatly folded papers lay before me. The first was my marriage certificate to Michael, the paper that had shackled me to hell on earth for 5 long years. Next was the deed of title in the name of Clara Miller, confirming my legal ownership of the 3-bedroom condo and the upscale residential complex that my husband's family shamelessly occupied. They were convinced it was a rental, and every month they demanded money from me, supposedly for rent. But in reality, my mother-in-law pocketed that money. Then I took out stacks of bank statements, which I had printed and had notarized at several different banks in advance. This was the history of my cash flows, the amounts I had saved from my salary and bonuses, the funds I had profitably invested long before my marriage. Finally, I picked up a time-yellowed envelope. Inside was my father's notarized will. My father, a man who had diligently run his artistic wood-carving business his whole life, left me his entire estate. This included the apartment I lived in, a large bank deposit, and most importantly, a retail space on a busy downtown street. Michael's family had always mocked me, saying I was from a small town, that my parents died early, so I was a poor girl who had latched onto a husband. If they saw this will, they would surely go mad with greed. From the bottom of the folder, I retrieved my most lethal weapon, a tiny silver flash drive. On it were audio recordings I had secretly made over a long period. The insults and humiliations from my mother-in-law, Michael and Paul's conversations about plans to siphon off my assets, everything was recorded clearly and distinctly. I carefully checked each document, then neatly placed everything in my bag. I closed the box, and the electronic lock confirmed it was securely fastened. Breathing a sigh of relief, I left the security room. Now, everything was ready. This hard evidence was enough to shatter all their family's intrigues and hypocrisy to pieces. I got in my car, opened my phone, and found a contact saved as attorney. This was Mr. Peterson, a renowned lawyer in the city, one of the best specialists in divorce and property disputes. I had arranged a meeting with him before the new year. I pressed the call button. The other end answered quickly. A calm and professional voice came on the line. "Hello, Miss Miller. I'm waiting for you at the office." I gripped the steering wheel tightly. My gaze was fixed firmly on the road ahead. "Hello, Mr. Peterson. I'm bringing all the documents. We can begin." The time had come to clean up the garbage in my life. I stepped on the gas, and the car sped down the asphalt, leaving behind the years of my youth, buried in darkness. The bright, late morning sun of January 1st shone through the windshield, illuminating my face. The battle to reclaim my life from the hands of cruel and greedy people had officially begun. Leaving the vault, I drove down a street shaded by old linden trees to the office of attorney Mr. Peterson. His office was located on a quiet street. The facade of the building was classic in style, elegant and restrained. After parking neatly, I took my bag, which now held my entire life and fortune, and went inside. The receptionist at the front desk smiled dazzlingly, bowed politely, and escorted me directly to the senior partner's office on the second floor. Mr. Peterson was in his 50s. He wore an impeccably tailored gray suit, and gold-rimmed glasses emphasized his intelligent and calm demeanor. They say first impressions matter. Looking at his confident manner, I fully trusted him with the most important matter of my life. Seeing me, Mr. Peterson stood up and shook my hand respectfully. "Hello, Miss Miller. Please, have a seat. Can I get you black tea or water?" I nodded in response, taking a seat in the armchair opposite him. "Thank you. A glass of water will be sufficient. Let's get straight to business. My time is precious right now." Mr. Peterson motioned for his secretary to bring water and to close the door firmly. The office immediately became quiet. It was completely insulated from the street noise. I opened my bag, carefully took out the brown folder, and placed it on the glass table. I began to take out the documents one by one, arranging them in separate piles. "This is my marriage certificate with Michael Carter. This is the deed of title for the condo in the luxury complex, registered solely in my name and acquired before my official marriage. And this is the will, with a notary's seal, drawn up by my father, John Miller. Before his death, my father left me all his property, including this condo and a commercial space on a central street. And finally, these are all the statements from my savings and investment accounts, made when I was not yet married." Mr. Peterson carefully put on white cotton gloves and began to examine each document intently. His eyebrows furrowed slightly. When he got to the will, he nodded approvingly, praising my late father's foresight in protecting his daughter. After finishing with the documents, he looked up at me. "Your legal documents are in perfect order. All this property is your personal property, acquired before the marriage or inherited in your name. According to the law, your husband's family has no rights to this property. They won't be able to take a single brick of your home from you." I gave a bitter smile. If they were decent people and lived like human beings, I wouldn't have had to take this step. I took a deep breath, pulled the tiny silver flash drive from the bottom of my bag, placed it on the table, and pushed it toward the lawyer. "The property documents are only half the story. Mr. Peterson, please insert this flash drive into your computer and listen to the recording. This is what I managed to record in my own home recently." The lawyer followed my request. He inserted the flash drive into his laptop and opened the single audio file. After a few seconds of static, the shrill and biting voice of Helen, my mother-in-law, came through, recorded with perfect clarity. "Michael, you need to think this through. That Clara may be a quiet one, but her family has money. I did some digging about this condo. The market price is now close to $500,000. You need to sweet-talk her, tell her to put it in both your names for joint responsibility. And make her give me her salary, I'll manage it. You can't trust a woman with money, it'll spoil her." Immediately after, the calm voice of Michael, my husband, followed, laced with a chilling calculation. "Mom, don't worry. I've thought it all out. I'll gradually get her to transfer the condo. As for our joint savings, I'll slowly siphon them off under the pretext of a business venture. I'll temporarily transfer it to Paul and Jessica. Let them invest it, bring in some profit. Can't keep all your eggs in one basket. Money in our own hands, that's what's reliable. Clara doesn't understand a thing about finance. She'll never know." The recording ended with the satisfied laughter of mother and son. Mr. Peterson turned off the sound. His face had become very serious. He took off his glasses, wiped them with a cloth, and looked me straight in the eye. "Miss Miller, I've handled hundreds of divorce cases, but such blatant and organized fraud with the intent to embezzle assets. This is truly an egregious case. This audio recording is ironclad proof that your husband acted deceitfully, grossly violating his marital obligations with the intent to steal marital property. Furthermore, the constant pressure from his family and the financial control constitute a form of psychological abuse. You will definitely win the case, receive the majority of the marital assets, and fully retain your personal property. I sat up straight, my hands folded in my lap. My soul was now as calm as an autumn lake. No resentment, no pain, only a steely resolve. Mr. Peterson, I want you to prepare a divorce petition today. Also, I request that you file a motion with the court to freeze all marital assets registered in Michael Carter's name or to which he has access. I don't want them to take another single dollar earned by my sweat and blood. As for the apartment, I have my own way of lawfully evicting them. The lawyer nodded in approval and immediately picked up a pen and paper to draft a plan for further legal action. We spent nearly 2 hours going over all the details and anticipating all the possible insane reactions of his family when the truth came out. After signing the power of attorney for the lawyer, I stood up to leave. The afternoon sun shone through the window, illuminating the hem of my coat. From this moment on, the marriage certificate was no longer shackles binding me. It would become the verdict for the bottomless greed of these people. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt my stomach rumble. I hadn't even had breakfast, having rushed straight to cleaning. But I had no appetite now. My next destination was a branch of a major bank on the city's main street. All my cash flows in the joint account Michael and I had opened right after the wedding were managed there. On a working day, January 1st, the bank was not crowded. The employees had just returned from the long weekend, dressed in bright uniforms. Thanks to my premium client card, I didn't have to take a number and wait in line. I was immediately invited into the VIP lounge. The branch manager kindly poured me a glass of water and politely asked how I had celebrated the new year. I replied with a few standard phrases and quickly got to the point. Please print out a full statement of all transactions on all my personal accounts, including the joint savings account registered to both me and Michael. I need to check some transactions to prepare for a new investment project. The bank employee quickly did everything on her computer. Just 10 minutes later, a thick stack of papers with the bank's red seal lay before me. I took a highlighter and began to review every line, every number. My monthly salary was regularly deposited into the account and then almost entirely withdrawn to cover the living expenses for the entire family of 5. Michael, although officially a department head at a construction company, brought home mere pennies. They had shamelessly shifted the entire financial burden onto me. Suddenly, my eyes froze on one of the pages of the joint savings account statement. 4 months ago, just when Paul and Jessica started talking about wanting to open a liquor store but complained about a lack of capital, a strange transaction occurred on this account. A huge sum, exactly $50,000, had been transferred. The transaction was conducted by Michael Carter. The recipient's name was clearly stated, Jessica Carter, Paul's wife. The payment description read, loan to sister-in-law for business development, interest-free, $50,000. They had dared to do this behind my back, using the online banking passwords I had entrusted to my husband, to withdraw all our joint savings and give it to his brother. Everything had happened exactly as his mother had instigated in that audio recording. Their greed wasn't limited to exploiting my labor. They were brazenly robbing me. I clenched my teeth. A chill ran down my spine, but my head was clearer than ever. I had acted just in time. If I had delayed any longer, I'm afraid they would have left me without a cent. I looked up at the branch manager. My voice was firm, without a trace of confusion. Please freeze all these personal accounts immediately. Disconnect all linked mobile apps. Cancel all current debit and credit cards. Then, open a completely new account for me and issue a new card. Transfer all my personal savings, certificates of deposit, and investment income to this new account. The manager was a bit surprised by my sudden request, but professionally adhered to the principles of confidentiality and client rights. The procedure was quick. My phone began to buzz with notifications of balance changes. The old accounts were now empty shells. The river of milk that had fed the laziness and greed of my husband's family was officially cut off. I tucked the brand new, elegant bank card into the very bottom of my bag. I would get back that miserable $50,000 through the court, down to the last penny. After finishing all my business, I thanked the staff and walked out into the main hall, heading for the exit. Just as I passed through the revolving glass door, I heard a familiar shrill female voice from the direction of the ATMs. "What's wrong with this stupid machine?" Michael said the money would be in the account after lunch. "Why do I keep trying to withdraw? And it just says the transaction cannot be completed. So annoying." I stopped. 10 yards away from me, standing irritably by an ATM, were Paul and Jessica. Jessica, dressed in a loud, colorful dress with that same designer bag I bought her on her shoulder, was holding a bank card and angrily tapping it against the screen. Paul stood nearby, smoking a cigarette. He reeked of beer. Apparently, on their way back from the barbecue, they had stopped here to withdraw cash for bills and shopping. They had no idea that the joint account had been frozen by me half an hour ago. All cash withdrawal operations were being flatly denied. An angry Jessica turned around and accidentally met my gaze. Her disgruntled expression immediately changed to her usual fake smile. She tugged at her husband's sleeve, pointed at me, and quickly ran over. "Oh, Clara, you're already done with the cleaning? And where are you all dressed up to go? Can't sit at home and rest, can you?" "We're about to continue celebrating. Wanted to withdraw some cash to pay for things and buy some more stuff for the holidays. But the card Michael gave us isn't working for some reason. Clara, since you're here, could you transfer us, like, $1,000 to our account? We'll pay you back tonight when we get home. Michael will give it all back to you." She spoke smoothly, without hesitation, as if my money was her own. Paul also walked over, spat on the ground, and supported his wife. "Clara, help us out. It's a holiday. Jessica wants to buy a gold chain for good luck. Mom always said, 'We're one family. Why count money? It only spoils relationships.'" I stood there, arms crossed, and gave their insolent faces a cold look. The smell of barbecue that clung to their clothes made me nauseous. The submissive and kind daughter-in-law in me was finally dead. I curled my lip in a contemptuous sneer. "One family, you say? I don't seem to recall. It seems this morning your mother and you said the car was too crowded and left me at home to clean and do the dishes. And now that you need money for shopping, you remember this daughter-in-law. Well, my money doesn't grow on trees for you to pick it up whenever you feel like it. From this day forward, don't even hope to get a single penny from me. You have hands and feet, go and earn it yourselves." With that, I didn't waste another second looking at their stunned, elongated faces. I turned decisively and walked with proud, confident steps toward my car. Angry shouts from Paul and Jessica erupted behind me, but I let them pass me by. The main performance was just beginning. I needed to save my strength to face the storm that lay ahead. Leaving the bank, I pulled out onto the main street. The sky on January 1st was clear. A light breeze brought the coolness of the first days of the year. Having shed the financial burden, I felt a lightness in my chest. No more anxious sighs at the end of each month. No need to skimp on myself to provide my husband's family with a lavish dinner. I opened the car door, got behind the wheel, took a deep breath, and started the engine. My next destination was the most reputable real estate agency in the city, located on a central avenue. The 3-bedroom condo in the luxury complex where I lived was the inheritance my father had saved for his whole life and bought for me before he died. This place was once filled with my hopes for a quiet and peaceful family nest. However, since I married Michael, his mother, under the pretext of being bored in her small town, brought Paul's family with her to Chicago. They shamelessly occupied the best rooms, used my expensive belongings, and turned my personal space into a noisy marketplace. They didn't know the condo was in my name and were convinced it was a rental, constantly berating me. Now, I decided to get rid of it all. A home desecrated by greed and ingratitude was not worth grieving over. I parked in front of the Prosperity Real Estate Agency. The director, a young man named Alex, who had once helped my friend buy a plot of land, immediately ran out to open the door for me. Despite the holidays, true businessmen never turn away clients. I walked in, sat on a comfortable sofa, and got straight to the point. "Hello, Alex. I have a luxury condo in the Lakeside Terrace complex that I need to sell urgently. The documents are in order. I am the sole owner, no liens or disputes. I want to sell it quickly, this month. See if you have any cash buyers. Alex quickly brewed some hot tea and poured me a cup. His eyes were clearly filled with joy. Condos at Lakeside Terrace were always very liquid, located in a prestigious area, and were a dream for many young families. Miss Miller, don't worry. I have many interested parties for this area. Do you have the documents with you? Let me take a look to assess it and prepare a listing with photos right away. I opened my bag, took out the deed of title, and placed it on the table. Alex carefully flipped through the pages, noting the square footage, floor, and window orientation. I clearly stated my conditions. I'm selling it with all the built-in furniture and appliances. The buyer will only need to bring their suitcases. I named a price slightly below market value to speed up the deal. Alex nodded in agreement. He immediately drew up an agreement and arranged for a photographer to come the next morning to take pictures for the listing. Just as I signed the contract, my phone rang in my bag. The screen displayed the name of Mr. Harrison, our building manager. Mr. Harrison was a meticulous, responsible man who knew all the residents well. I apologized to Alex and stepped aside to answer. Mr. Harrison's voice on the phone was agitated. Clara, this is Mr. Harrison. Are you not at home? Your husband Michael is here in the lobby with his mother and 5 or 6 other relatives from out of town with a ton of luggage. They're demanding security. Open the door for them. Michael says you left with the keys and is asking the management company to open it with a master key so his relatives can go in and rest. Please confirm this information so security knows what to do. I gave a wry smile. Their audacity knew no bounds. First, they kicked me out of the trip on the pretext of it being too crowded, and now they've dragged all their relatives to my home to show off and live for free. I cleared my throat and answered, Mr. Harrison, in a very serious and clear tone. Mr. Harrison, listen to me carefully. This condo is my personal property, registered solely in my name. I am currently in the process of divorcing Michael Carter. From this moment on, I demand that the management company completely deny entry to the building to Michael Carter, his mother, and all their relatives. None of them should enter the lobby, let alone my floor. If anyone tries to force their way in, please call the police for trespassing. Mr. Harrison was silent for a second, stunned by the news. But as an experienced manager, he immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. I understand, Clara. You are the legal owner, and we will strictly follow your instructions. I will personally go down to the lobby and instruct security not to let your husband's group through the turnstiles. You can go about your business without worry. I thanked him and hung up. Returning to the table, I apologized to Alex and said my goodbyes. The sale of the condo was settled, but for complete security and to prevent any desperate actions from them, I needed a new lock. I opened my phone book and called Sam, an old and trusted locksmith. I arranged to meet him at 3 p.m. at my apartment to replace the entire lock system on the front door. From the electronic fingerprint lock to the backup mechanical one, I requested everything be replaced with the most reliable anti-burglary system. At 3 o'clock, I was already in the hallway on the 15th floor. Sam, with his toolbox, was already waiting for me. Seeing me, he smiled, greeted me, and quickly got to work. The sound of a drill, the clang of metal. I stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching as my sturdy oak door was fitted with new armor. Every screw was tightened. My fingerprints were carefully entered into the new system's memory. In less than an hour, the work was done. Sam handed me 5 new, shiny mechanical keys and explained in detail how to use the electronic keypad. I paid him generously, saw him to the elevator, and returned to my door. I placed my index finger on the sensor panel. A quiet beep sounded, and the latch automatically retracted. I pushed the door open, stepped inside, and slammed it shut. Now my home was my impregnable fortress. Those outside, indulging in illusions of imaginary power, would soon get a drenching of ice-cold water. After finishing with the house matters, I looked at the time on my phone. 4:30 p.m. By this time, their lavish barbecue picnic should be coming to an end. I decided to go and find them. I wanted to see with my own eyes the pathetic state of those who were used to living off someone else's money and were now cut off from their source of funds. I knew well the place they usually went to, It was a Korean barbecue restaurant by a picturesque lake outside the city. The roads in the evening of January 1st were becoming busy again. Streams of cars rushed back and forth, carrying traces of the holiday bustle. I slowly turned onto the acacia-lined road leading to the restaurant. I chose an inconspicuous parking spot under a sprawling old maple tree on the opposite side of the road, directly across from the restaurant entrance. From this vantage point, I had a perfect view of everything happening at the entrance. I lowered the window halfway, inhaling the scent of wood, charcoal, and greasy grilled meat, mixed with the wind, coming from the restaurant's chimneys. The sounds of car horns and loud music from neighboring establishments filled the air. I took out my phone, turned on the voice recorder, placed it on the dashboard, and began to watch the brightly lit doors of the restaurant intently. I didn't have to wait long. About 15 minutes later, the transparent glass door of the restaurant swung open forcefully. Michael came out first. His face was gray, sweat beaded on his forehead. His mother, Helen, followed him, looking displeased and irritated, muttering something under her breath. Paul and Jessica came out last, stripped of their morning's arrogance and cheerfulness. They now looked like deflated balloons. The sister-in-law was petulantly stomping in her high heels, constantly tugging at her husband's sleeve and complaining. They gathered under the bright restaurant sign, right by the road. Given that they always spoke very loudly, I could clearly hear every word from inside my car. Michael shook a credit card in front of his mother's face. His voice was full of bewilderment. "Mom, look, I gave them 3 cards in a row, and they all came back with an error. The credit card is blocked. The debit card also says the account is frozen." The restaurant manager was looking at me like I was a con artist. I ended up having to call a colleague and ask him to urgently transfer money to pay the $150 bill. It was so embarrassing, just awful. Helen, with her hands on her hips, yelled for the whole street to hear, "How do you manage your affairs, Michael? We go out for a celebratory dinner at the beginning of the year, and you embarrass me in front of everyone. The money is in your account. You're supposed to manage it. How could it be blocked? Maybe that Clara did something?" I noticed this morning her face was all gloomy. I suspected something was wrong then. Michael clutched his head. His pathetic state was obvious. "I don't know, Mom. I didn't change the bank password. The credit card has a shared limit with her. It's probably a system error at the bank because of the holidays. We'll go home. I'll ask her to check." Standing nearby, Paul spat on the sidewalk and interjected irritably, "What system error? You better keep an eye on your wife. The card you gave my wife this afternoon, the ATM blocked that one too. You keep trusting your wife with all the money, you'll end up on the street. That $50,000 you gave us, Jessica already put it down as a deposit for inventory for our store. Where are we supposed to get cash now to help you out?" As soon as Paul said those words, Helen turned pale and forcefully hit her younger son on the shoulder, hissing at him in a low but frightened voice, "Paul, be quiet. If Clara finds out about that $50,000, she'll raise such a stink that everything will fall apart. I told Michael to secretly withdraw it and give it to you for the business. If it had stayed in the joint account under Clara's control, we would have never gotten ahead. And here you are, yelling about it for the whole street to hear. If someone overhears, how am I supposed to deny it later?" Their conversation was recorded down to the last word on my voice recorder. My heart beat faster, not from fear, but from a deep sense of satisfaction. What a bunch of idiots, discussing such secrets right in the middle of the street. They had absolutely no idea that every word they spoke now was the final nail in the coffin of their own audacity. Panicked by the lack of cash to catch a cab, Helen started calling everyone she knew, asking for loans. She called her sister in Indiana, loudly complaining of a sudden illness and an urgent need for money. But her sister, apparently well acquainted with her relative's character, politely refused. Unable to borrow money, she angrily put away her phone and vented her frustration on Michael. "You're a useless man. You can't even handle your own wife." Now there's no money, the cards are blocked, and relatives from Indiana are waiting in the lobby at home. Call that Clara, tell her to bring money and pick us all up, and be quick about it. Michael frantically took out his phone and started dialing my number. Of course, I had blacklisted all their numbers earlier in the day. He called and called, but to no avail. His face grew more and more pathetic. At that moment, Helen happened to look across the road. Her gaze fell on my car, parked under the maple tree. She squinted, trying to make out the license plate, and then started pounding Michael on the back, pointing a finger directly at me. Look, isn't that the car Clara drives? The one she says is her friend's?" I remember the plate. It ends in 89. It looks like she's sitting inside, spying on us. That witch decided to mock me. With those words, seething with rage, she stepped into the roadway, intending to run across and confront me. She rolled up her sleeves. Her face was ferocious, as if she wanted to tear me to pieces. Paul, his wife, and Michael also looked in my direction in surprise. I smiled coldly. All the evidence I needed was securely saved on my phone. I had no reason to get into a shouting match with these uneducated people on the street. I calmly turned off the voice recorder and saved the file. Watching Helen charge across the median, I unhurriedly pressed the button and raised the window. I shifted gears and stepped on the gas. The engine roared powerfully. The car shot forward, leaving my mother-in-law frozen in the middle of the road in a cloud of dust. The show at the restaurant was perfectly concluded. Now it was time to prepare for the main scene, which would unfold in the lobby of our condominium complex. Dusk was falling, and the city was lighting up. The noisy daytime streets gave way to the bright lights of billboards and yellow street lamps. My car smoothly entered the main gates of the lakeside terrace. The evening January breeze, rustling through the green plantings along the inner road, brought a light chill. Unlike the heavy, oppressive feeling I used to have every time I returned from work to my husband's family, my heart was now light and calm. Everything was falling into place. I parked neatly, checked my bag with all the legal documents one more time, and leisurely entered the elevator to go up to the lobby on the first floor. In my coat pocket were 5 new, shiny mechanical keys. They were the symbol of my freedom, the impenetrable wall I had built to stop those who greedily coveted the fruits of my labor. As soon as I stepped out of the elevator, a chaotic scene met my eyes in the waiting area near the reception desk. About 10 adults and children in shabby clothes were sitting and lying on the sofas, surrounded by bags of potatoes, boxes of apples, and numerous packages. This was Helen's family from Indiana. They were cracking sunflower seeds, throwing the shells directly onto the shiny tiled floor, and complaining that the management company was too strict and wouldn't give them a key fob for the elevator to get up to the apartment. Several shirtless children were running and screaming around the flower pots, ignoring the disapproving remarks of the cleaning staff. This squalid scene only made me feel tired. Helen hadn't changed in all these years. She always loved to put on a show, arbitrarily turning my home into a free hotel to boast to her relatives about her supposed wealth. I walked coldly past this crowd, heading straight for the reception desk. Mr. Harrison, the manager, stood with his hands behind his back, directing the security guards with a stern face. Seeing me, he nodded in greeting. His eyes held a deep sympathy of a man who had seen life. "Clara, you're back. Look at this mess. Your husband's relatives have been causing a ruckus here since this afternoon. I explained the rules and your requirements as the owner to them clearly, but they refused to leave. They are stubbornly waiting for Helen to sort things out. I've increased security, put 3 more guys on, to make sure no one gets to the elevators." I smiled gratefully. My voice was soft but firm. "Thank you so much, Mr. Harrison, and to the security team. I know this has caused you a lot of trouble and spoiled the look of our lobby, but today I have to put an end to this once and for all. Please help me a little longer. They should be on their way." At that very moment, the automatic revolving door opened. Attorney Mr. Peterson entered in his impeccable suit, carrying his trademark black leather briefcase. His confident and professional appearance immediately drew everyone's attention. I walked over to him, invited him to sit at a VIP table for residents, located at a decent distance from the crowd. Mr. Peterson opened his briefcase, took out a neatly folded folder, and placed it on the table. "Hello, Miss Miller." "Hello, Mr. Harrison. I completed all the legal formalities this afternoon. The unilateral divorce petition and property division lawsuit have been filed. The motion for an asset freeze is also under review and will take effect at the beginning of the next business week. Don't worry, Miss Miller, all the legal traps are set. They have no more chances to move anything." Mr. Harrison nodded approvingly. He took a large sheet of paper from his folder, on which a notice was printed in red letters with the round seal of the Lakeside Terrace Management Company. "This is an internal notice I just ordered to be printed. It clearly states that Citizen Michael Carter, Citizen Helen Carter, and their associates are prohibited from entering the common areas and apartment number 1502, belonging to the owner Clara Miller. I will have security posted on the bulletin board in the lobby and in the elevators. We must act officially, with documents, so they have no grounds for scandals." I looked at the notice, feeling a great strength building up inside me. My thorough preparation, Mr. Harrison's support, and the lawyer's professionalism had created an unbreakable wall. I leaned back on the soft sofa, folded my hands in my lap, and took a sip of the hot chamomile tea that a receptionist had just brought. The sweet taste of the tea with a slight bitterness on my tongue was exactly like the taste of my 5-year marriage. I looked at the wall clock. It was almost 7 p.m. They must have taken a bus or walked from that restaurant. The humiliation of being kicked out for lack of money, coupled with fatigue, must have driven them to their wits' end. I waited calmly. The stage was set. The audience had taken their seats. All that was left was to wait for the main actors to play out their pathetic drama. Time dragged on slowly. The noise from the out-of-town relatives gradually subsided. They were tired and hungry. The atmosphere in the lobby became tense, like a taut string. The spider had long woven its web, and now only had to wait calmly for the prey to walk right into the trap. My calmness at that moment was the sharpest weapon, ready to pierce any mask of hypocrisy that Michael Carter's family was about to put on. At exactly 7:15 p.m., a cheap taxi screeched to a halt at the entrance of the complex. The door flew open, and Michael got out first, followed by Helen and the couple, Paul and Jessica. Their appearance was so pathetic it was hard to believe. Their clothes were wrinkled, their faces exhausted and sweaty. Jessica no longer looked like the glamorous lady with the designer bag. Her face was contorted with anger, and she struggled to walk in her high heels. Helen, barely out of the car, launched into a tirade against the taxi driver, accusing him of deliberately taking a longer route to jack up the fare, causing a loud scene right in front of the luxury building. They entered through the revolving door with disgruntled looks. The relatives from Indiana, who had been dozing on the sofas, immediately perked up and surrounded Helen. Reproaches flew from all sides. "Aunt Helen, where have you been? We've been waiting for you since lunch. We're starving. You invited us over, but the security here won't let us in. They're chasing us away like dogs. We don't know what kind of fancy house you have here, but leaving guests like this in the lobby is just not right." Helen, surrounded by the crowd, her hair disheveled, turned crimson with rage. She pushed aside the bags of small-town gifts and shrieked at her relatives to shut up. Surveying the lobby, her sharp, razor-like gaze landed on me, calmly sipping tea in the VIP area. Next to me sat the manager, Mr. Harrison, and an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit. The anger she had been suppressing since lunch erupted. Helen rolled up her sleeves and, pushing everyone aside, lunged towards our table like a predator on its prey. Paul, Jessica, and Michael immediately followed, ready to tear me apart. "Oh, look at you. You're the one who dared to block the cards and lock the house so my family couldn't get in? What's gotten into you, to treat your mother-in-law like this? I'm going to smash your face in." She screamed and raised her hand to strike me, but her rough hand never touched my face. A strong barrier pushed her back. Attorney Mr. Peterson stepped forward, his tall and sturdy frame shielding me from the enraged mother-in-law. He adjusted the lapel of his jacket and gave her contorted face a cold, piercing look. "Ma'am, I ask you to maintain your distance and watch your language. Threats, defamation of character, and attempted assault in a public place can land you in the defendant's chair. I am Mr. Peterson, the legal representative of my client, Clara Miller. Any matters you wish to discuss, please address them to me." Helen froze. Her hand hung limply in the air. Michael rushed to support his mother and looked in horror first at the lawyer, then at me. He pointed a finger at me. His voice trembled with shock. "Clara, what are you doing? What lawyer? Have you lost your mind? Just because I didn't take you to the barbecue this morning, you got offended and orchestrated this whole circus with the cards and the locks, and now you've brought a lawyer? Do you realize how embarrassed Mom and I are in front of our relatives? Don't air our dirty laundry in public. Don't take it too far." I slowly stood up, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from my black dress. I looked directly into his frantic eyes and sneered, cold and piercing. "Dirty laundry? The door to that laundry room I had fitted with new locks this afternoon. You and your family will never cross its threshold again. I'm not here today to put on a circus or argue over a cheap dinner. I'm here to inform you that my divorce petition and the motion to freeze all marital assets have already been filed with the court. From this moment on, we will speak the language of the law." The relatives from Indiana, standing around, gasped in surprise. They began to whisper, pointing fingers at Helen and Michael. Paul, standing behind, couldn't take it anymore and jumped forward. "Have you gone completely insane? My brother rented this apartment. He's the one who brings money into the family. What right do you have to kick us out onto the street? What right do you have to block the cards? You think just because you have a lawyer, you can do whatever you want? Mr. Peterson didn't waste his breath on the ignoramus. He took a notarized copy of the deed of title from his briefcase and held it up for everyone to see. His voice boomed through the lobby, loud and clear. "I ask for everyone's attention. Apartment 1000, 502 inches. This building is the personal property of citizen Clara Miller, acquired before her marriage. The family of citizen Michael Carter has absolutely no ownership or usage rights to this property. Clara Miller's demand for the Carter family's eviction and the prohibition of their entry is entirely lawful." At that moment, Mr. Harrison also stepped forward, pointing to the bulletin board by the elevator. "The management company has also issued an official notice requiring citizens Carter, and all their relatives to immediately vacate the lobby. Security has the right to use force in case of public order disturbances." The truth, revealed so quickly and mercilessly, made my husband's family freeze in place. Helen opened her mouth, but couldn't utter a word. Her face went from crimson to deathly pale. She turned to her son with bewilderment and a silent question in her eyes. Michael was broken. He knew the truth about the condo, but had been deceiving his entire family for years out of a false sense of shame. Now the cat was out of the bag, and he was exposed in front of all his relatives. This humiliation was more painful than 1,000 slaps. Michael suddenly changed his tactics. His eyes turned red. He stepped forward, clasped his hands in a pleading gesture, and spoke in the same pathetic tone he always used to manipulate me. "Clara, I'm begging you, calm down. We've been together for 5 years. We have such deep feelings. How can you be so cruel? I know I've been busy with work lately. I've been inattentive to you. Mom is getting old. She speaks without thinking. You're the daughter-in-law. Be more lenient. If you kick us out onto the street in the middle of the night, how will we live? Withdraw the lawsuit, please. I promise. From this day on, I will treat you well. I'll fix everything." Crocodile tears streamed down his face. If this were the old Clara, I might have faltered, given in to these false, sweet words. But the current Clara had a heart of ice. I lifted my chin. My gaze, as sharp as a dagger, pierced his dark soul. "Marital feelings? Aren't you ashamed to utter those words? Where were those feelings when you and your mother were plotting to take my late father's inheritance from me? Where were those feelings when you secretly withdrew all our joint savings, $50,000, and gave it to your brother for his amusement? Lower your hypocritical head, Michael. Your role as the model husband is over." My steel words sounded like the final, deadly blow, shattering all their lines of defense. The confrontation had reached its peak, and I knew that victory was mine. From this night on, a long path of retribution began for these greedy people. As soon as my words rang out, a heavy silence fell over the vast lobby. The tense atmosphere gave way to universal astonishment. A few seconds later, as if a dam had burst, a murmur of whispers arose. Neighbors passing by stopped, forming a circle around my husband's family. Michael stood as if rooted to the spot. There was no color in his face. His hands, just moments before clasped in supplication, hung limply, trembling. Helen's eyes were wide open. Her thin lips were pressed into a white line. She was speechless. I didn't give them the slightest chance to justify themselves or play the victim. 5 years of patience had forged a heart of steel and a cold mind within me. I turned to Mr. Peterson and nodded. He took a thick stack of documents from his briefcase. These were the very bank statements with red seals that I had obtained that afternoon. I stepped forward, took the papers, and threw them right at Michael's chest. The white sheets, evidence of his betrayal, scattered in the air and littered the shiny tiled floor. I lifted my chin. My voice was firm. Every word was like the point of a knife, stabbing at their hypocritical masks. Pick them up, Michael, and look carefully. Open your eyes and read these numbers. $50,000 earned by my sweat and blood, which I saved for this family, you secretly transferred to your sister-in-law Jessica's account under the guise of an interest-free loan. You thought I was a fool. You deceived me, squandered our marital assets to feed your relatives, and now you dare to speak to me of marital feelings? My words boomed like thunder on a clear day. The relatives from Indiana, hearing about the $50,000, stared wide-eyed. Paul and Jessica, standing behind, backed away, lowering their heads and trying to avoid the judgmental glares. Helen, realizing their schemes were exposed in front of everyone, panicked and tried to justify herself. "You're lying! My son earns money, and if he lent some to his brother for a business, what's wrong with that? You're the wife, and you count every penny with your husband's family, you ungrateful daughter-in-law." I laughed. My bitter laughter echoed through the lobby. Even in this situation, she tried to distort the truth. I didn't argue. I took the silver flash drive from my bag and handed it to Mr. Peterson. He immediately connected it to his tablet and turned the volume up to full. The shrill, sarcastic voice of Helen and the calm, calculating tone of Michael filled the entire space. Every word about their plans to make me sign over the condo, to secretly siphon off joint savings for Paul and Jessica, and all their contempt for me, it was all laid bare for public display. As soon as the recording ended, a real storm of indignation erupted. The naked truth exposed all the greed, cruelty, and immorality of my husband's family. Public opinion, always on the side of truth, now crashed down on them. They had single-handedly destroyed the last remnants of their dignity. One of Michael's distant relatives furiously threw an apple she was holding onto the floor and, pointing a finger at Helen, screamed, "My God, Helen, what have you done? You bragged to everyone back home that your son bought a condo and a car in Chicago, invited us here for the holidays, said we'd live in luxury, and it turns out you're just thieves. Living in your daughter-in-law's house and scheming to take her property. The Carter family never had such shameless people as you and your son. We're so ashamed. How can we face people now?" The neighbors didn't stay silent either. An elderly woman from a lower floor sighed and said with contempt, "You reap what you sow." I saw how this Clara worked from morning till night for the whole family. She didn't even buy herself new clothes, while the mother-in-law and the other daughter-in-law did nothing but dress up and go out. Ungrateful and greedy people like them belong in jail. Kicking them out of the house is too lenient. Helen, hearing curses from her own relatives and neighbors, swayed and collapsed onto the sofa. She clutched her heart, breathing heavily, and couldn't utter a word in her defense. Paul and Jessica, seeing that things were bad, tried to slip away unnoticed towards the exit, but they were stopped by some young men among the relatives who gave them a piece of their mind. Seeing his family fall apart, Michael finally broke. All his masculine pride was trampled. He staggered over to me and fell to his knees at my feet. Tears and snot streamed down his pale face. He reached out, trying to grab the hem of my coat. "Clara, I was wrong. Forgive me. 1,000 times, forgive me. Remember our 5 years together. Remember how I took care of you when you were sick. Please, withdraw the lawsuit. I'll make Paul return the money, down to the last penny. Don't kick me and my mom out onto the street. After such public shame, my mom won't be able to handle it. Have pity on me." I coldly stepped back, avoiding his dirty touch. I looked at the man kneeling before me and felt not a shred of pity. it was all too late. His tears now were caused by the fear of losing financial support and reputation, not by remorse for the pain he had caused me. Our 5 years of feelings, you and your mother buried them long ago. God sees everything. Payback comes sooner or later, and you brought it upon yourselves. Let the law handle it now. From this moment on, everything between me and your family is over. Never appear before me again." I turned, nodded in gratitude to Mr. Harrison, and then invited Mr. Peterson to leave. Turning around, I walked straight towards the main exit. Behind me were Michael's sobs and the chaotic shouts of relatives, but I never once looked back. Walking out through the transparent glass door, I took a deep breath of the cold evening air. The darkness was left behind, giving way to the light of freedom that now illuminated my path. Leaving the chaos and noise of the lobby behind, I drove away. The night streets were noticeably quieter. A fresh January wind blew through the slightly open car window. The feeling of the shackles that had weighed me down for 5 years being thrown off made my body feel weightless. No one would ever force me to get up before dawn to cook and clean again. There would be no more critical glances and reproaches. No more having to save every penny at the market to please people who knew no limits. From now on, I would live only for myself. I didn't drive to some unfamiliar place. I turned onto a historic street in the heart of the city. Unlike the noisy new developments, an atmosphere of calm and tranquility reigned here. I parked in front of a shop with a wide facade, over which hung a wooden sign with an elegant inscription, Smirnoff's Artistic Wood Carving. This was my father's life's work, a place that held the warmest memories of my childhood. The shop was now managed by Uncle Andrew, an old master carpenter and my father's sworn brother. The shop was already closed at this time, but I knew that Uncle Andrew often spent the night in the attic in the back to look after the inventory. I went up and knocked quietly on the metal roll-down gate. A moment later, there was a scraping sound, and the gate opened a crack. Uncle Andrew peered out from the gap. His eyes expressed surprise and joy when he recognized me. "Hello, Uncle Andrew. I'm sorry to bother you so late. I need to talk to you about something urgent." Uncle Andrew hastily raised the gate and led me into a small living room that smelled of sandalwood. He poured me a cup of hot green tea and asked with concern, "What happened, my dear? Why have you come in the middle of the night? Speak calmly. I'm always ready to help. After your father passed, I've considered you my own daughter." I took the cup, and the warm steam warmed my face. I slowly told him everything. What happened today? The decision to divorce, and how my husband's family was exposed in the lobby of the condominium complex. After listening to me, Uncle Andrew's kind face darkened with anger. He slammed his fist on the table. "Those scoundrels! When I first saw that Michael, he seemed so quiet, so intelligent. I thought he was a decent man, that he would love and cherish you. But it turns out his whole family is a pack of wolves. It's good that you came to your senses in time and gathered evidence to protect your property. Your father in the great beyond would surely be saddened to hear about this. But he would also be proud of how strong and decisive his daughter has become." I smiled and looked at him firmly. "Thank you, Uncle. I came to you with a very important request. Starting tomorrow, please change all the locks on this shop. If my mother-in-law, Michael, or anyone from their family comes here, under no circumstances let them in or say anything. They are desperate now and might come here to cause a scene or ask for something. I've already put the condo up for sale. As soon as I finalize all the documents, I'm going to take over this space and turn it into a bookstore cafe, just as my father once dreamed." Uncle Andrew nodded decisively, thumping his chest. "You can count on me. This is your father's land, and no stranger will dare to enter and ruin anything. You focus on the court case, and I'll take care of the premises. I'll clean everything up, get it ready for the day you start renovations." After discussing everything in detail with Uncle Andrew, I said goodbye so he could rest. I drove to a 5-star hotel on the lakefront and booked a luxurious room to stay in for a few days while the condo was being sold. As I was checking in at the reception, the young woman in an elegant uniform smiled politely and handed me a small, sealed package. "Ms. Miller, a man came by a little while ago, introduced himself as your husband, and left this for you. He said he couldn't reach you by phone and asked me to hand it to you personally. He looked very tired and dejected, and waited in the lobby for a long time before leaving. I frowned and took the package. I didn't need to guess to know that Michael had used his last few dollars to follow me all the way to the hotel. His stubbornness and cowardice always made him cling to the last, most ghostly hope. I thanked the young woman, took my luggage, and went up to my room. The hotel room was spacious, with a luxurious design in warm tones. I threw my bag on the sofa, sat down, and coldly tore open the package. Inside was a worn red velvet box and a letter hastily written on a piece of graph paper. I opened the box. Inside lay a cheap, old-fashioned silver ring. It was the ring Michael had given me on our first anniversary when we were still in college. He had held my hand then and sworn that even though the ring was cheap, it held the most sincere and pure love, and that he would spend his life making sure I never wanted for anything. I gave a wry smile and picked up the letter. The uneven lines were full of complaints and pleas. Michael asked me to remember the past, blamed everything on his mother, swore to change, to cut ties with Paul's family, and to dedicate himself entirely to me. He was using an old relic to evoke pity, trying to manipulate the woman he thought still loved him. But he was mistaken. Sincere love is incompatible with selfishness. It does not live in base calculations. The silver ring, once a symbol of young love, had now become nothing but a representation of cheapness and falsehood. I slowly stood up, took the ring and the letter, walked over to the trash can by the vanity, and without a moment's hesitation, opened my hand. The ring and the letter fell to the bottom, forever severing all ties with a deceitful past. I went into the bathroom and soaked in a warm bath with a few drops of calming lavender oil. The dirt, fatigue, and negative energy of the day were washed away by the streams of water. Getting out of the bath, I put on a soft silk robe, dried my long hair, and lay down on the soft bed that smelled of fresh linen. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled on the smooth surface of the lake. I closed my eyes, and a faint smile of relief appeared on my lips. It was the most peaceful and sound sleep I had had in 5 long years. The humiliating past was locked away and discarded. Tomorrow, upon waking, I would breathe the air of freedom, ready to meet the new, bright, and proud life that awaited me. The bright morning sun of January 7th shone through the thin curtains, gently waking me from a deep sleep. I hadn't slept so soundly in a long time, without nightmares, without being startled by Michael's snoring or my mother-in-law's nightly cough demanding water. I stretched, inhaling deeply the scent of lemongrass that filled the luxurious hotel room. A feeling of lightness and energy filled my body, like when I was 19, before I fell into the vicious cycle of my unhappy marriage. I got up unhurriedly, freshened up, and put on an elegant beige silk dress. Going down to the hotel restaurant for breakfast, I chose a table by the window with a view of the calm lake. Sipping hot black coffee, I browsed the morning news on my phone. Opening the city's news feed, I immediately saw a viral video with a sensational headline: "Family causes riot in lobby of luxury condo, attacks security and resists police." I took a sip of coffee and calmly pressed play. In the video, shot by one of the residents, my mother-in-law, Helen, with disheveled hair, was screaming hysterically and rolling on the floor in front of the security desk at the lakeside terrace. She was cursing out the management company and scratching a young security guard. Michael's younger brother, Paul, his face red from alcohol, was trying to throw a plastic chair at the reception desk. Michael was frantically trying to calm them down, but to no avail. The relatives from Indiana were grabbing their belongings in a panic and scattering. At the end of the video, with sirens wailing, 2 police cars pulled up to the entrance. Police officers quickly subdued Helen and Paul and took everyone involved to the station for disturbing the peace at night. Payback had come surprisingly quickly. Just yesterday evening, they were full of arrogance, believing they had the right to control others' destinies, flouting the law and human dignity, and now they had to spend their holiday in a police station. This disgrace would undoubtedly stay with them for the rest of their lives. I turned off my phone. My soul was as calm as the surface of the lake. I felt no gloating or pity for them. To me, they were now just strangers who were paying the price for their greed and cruelty. After breakfast, I drove straight to the main branch of the bank. Yesterday, I had only requested an emergency freeze on the accounts. Today, I needed to completely close all the old accounts to permanently cut off any possibility of them using loopholes to withdraw money. The bank employee, after carefully checking my documents, quickly performed all the operations in the system. All supplementary cards in Michael's name, all joint savings accounts from which he had stolen, were permanently blocked and deleted. I had barely left the bank when my phone rang. It was attorney Mr. Peterson. His voice today was cheerful and confident. "Hello, Miss Miller. I'm calling to give you two important pieces of news. First, the asset freeze motion I filed yesterday was accepted and urgently approved by the court this morning. Michael Carter will no longer be able to move any assets. Second, and most importantly, the private investigators I hired have gathered evidence, photos, and bank statements confirming that Michael Carter has been secretly supporting a young mistress in a rented apartment on the south side of Chicago for almost 2 years. He paid for all her rent and expensive purchases with his salary card, while telling you that his company was losing money to avoid contributing to the family budget. I froze, gripping the phone tightly. Supporting a mistress. It turned out this man's depravity wasn't limited to obeying his mother and stealing money from his wife for his brother. He was also brazenly cheating on me. All those 2 years, when he was supposedly away on business trips, when he refused intimacy under the pretext of being tired all that time he was spending his energy and money on another woman. Disgust rose in my throat, but my strong mind immediately suppressed it. This evidence was the perfect final blow. I took a deep breath and replied to the lawyer in a completely calm tone. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Please prepare this evidence meticulously. Adultery and the use of marital funds to support a mistress are gross violations of the family code. I want him to return every dollar spent improperly. We will meet in court as the undisputed winners." After hanging up, I hadn't even reached the parking lot when my phone rang again. It was Alex from the real estate agency. His voice was ringing with joy. "Miss Miller, Happy New Year. A buyer has been found for your condo, and they've put down a deposit. We're just waiting for your decision on the date for signing the contract and handover. It's a married couple who have just returned from abroad. They love the location and design of the apartment. They are ready to buy at your price with 100% cash payment, no mortgage. The main thing is to close the deal this week. Please come to the office to sign the preliminary agreement." Good news kept pouring in, and my mood soared. I immediately drove to the agency. All formalities were settled quickly and clearly. Holding a check for a $50,000 deposit in my hands, I realized that I had finally broken free from a place full of painful memories. After receiving the money, I didn't delay. I asked Alex to find me another apartment. My requirements were simple. Not too big, 1 bedroom, but on a high floor with good security, and most importantly, with a view of the river. Alex turned out to be a true professional. That same evening, he showed me an apartment on the 20th floor that fully met my expectations. Standing on the spacious balcony, caressed by the wind and looking at the calm flow of the river in the sunset, I agreed to the purchase without hesitation. This would be my new nest, where there would be no place for lies and tears. The following days flew by in pleasant chores. I entrusted all the real estate paperwork to Alex. I dedicated the rest of my time to my father's shop. I quit my old job, determined to be the master of my own life. Uncle Andrew helped me clear out the space. I drew up the design plan myself. The old walls were painted a warm cream color. The antique wooden racks I turned into huge floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I ordered simple wooden furniture, green potted plants, and warm lighting. I would open a bookstore cafe where people who love peace and quiet could have a cup of fragrant tea, read a good book, and rest from the hustle and bustle. This was my girlhood dream, which I had to put aside while trying to be a good wife and daughter-in-law. Now, I was building it from scratch, with my own hands. The week of waiting flew by in a flash. This morning, the sky over the city was clear and cloudless. The golden rays of the sun fell on the steps of the city courthouse, their warmth dispelling the cold of the past winter. I was dressed in a light blue business suit, my hair neatly tied in a bun, my makeup understated but emphasizing my determination. I walked up the stairs proudly and confidently. Beside me walked attorney Mr. Peterson with his briefcase full of irrefutable evidence, confident and imperturbable. A solemn silence reigned in the courtroom. Michael Carter's family was already there. Seeing them, I could hardly recognize them. In just a week, they had changed beyond recognition. Michael was in a wrinkled shirt, unshaven, with deep, dark circles under his eyes, full of despair. Helen sat on the public bench. She had aged 10 years. Her hair was noticeably grayer, her face gray and haggard. The arrest, the need to run around and borrow money for a lawyer, all of this had drained the last of their strength. Paul and Jessica were nowhere to be seen, probably scared of a confrontation over the $50,000. They were hiding somewhere. The hearing began under the chairmanship of a stern judge. When it was time to speak, Mr. Peterson stood up straight and delivered his speech loudly and clearly. He systematically presented the evidence of my premarital property, the deed of title, my father's will. Michael's lawyer tried to object, claiming that Michael had invested money in renovations and furniture and demanded a share. But Mr. Peterson immediately presented bank statements proving that all expenses were paid from my personal credit card and salary. Michael had not a single transfer to prove his contribution. The climax was the discussion of the division of marital property. The statement of the $50,000 transferred to Jessica's account was laid on the court table. Along with it, the audio recording of the mother and son's conversation in the restaurant. The judge frowned and questioned Michael sternly about his intentional embezzlement of assets. Michael mumbled, sweat pouring from him. He couldn't give any coherent explanation. And the final, decisive blow was struck when Mr. Peterson presented the court with evidence of Michael's marital infidelity. Photos of him embracing his young mistress at the entrance of her rented apartment, receipts for jewelry and expensive clothing purchased with his salary card. Everything was laid out on the table. A murmur went through the courtroom. Helen, sitting in the audience, gasped and clutched her heart. She had always been proud of her decent and exemplary son, and now the truth, revealed before everyone, had robbed her of her last support. Michael was completely crushed, his knees trembling. He buried his head in his hands on the table and sobbed. All his excuses were shattered by the ironclad evidence. After deliberation, the judge read out the verdict loudly. Thanks to the compelling evidence, the law was on my side. The court granted my divorce petition. As for the property, the condo and the commercial space were recognized as my personal property. The court ordered Michael Carter to return the $50,000 he had arbitrarily transferred to his brother, as well as to reimburse all funds spent on supporting his mistress. As for the remaining joint savings, given Michael's gross violation of marital fidelity, psychological abuse, and embezzlement of assets, the court ruled that I would receive 80% of the amount, while Michael would receive only 20%. In addition, he was ordered to pay me a large sum as compensation for moral damages. I had achieved a brilliant, unconditional victory. No mercy for those who deliberately destroyed someone else's life. Leaving the courthouse, I squinted from the bright sun. The free, clean air filled my lungs. Mr. Peterson congratulated me and left. I lingered on the steps, watching the busy traffic. Suddenly, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. I turned around. Michael was running towards me, stumbling. His eyes were red and swollen, his shoulders slumped. He looked pathetic. He stopped 2 steps away from me. His lips trembled in a last-ditch attempt to fix something. "Clara, I've lost everything. I have nowhere to live. I have no money. They found out about the scandal at work and are going to fire me. My mom was just taken to the hospital with a hypertensive crisis. I'm begging you, for old time's sake, at least forgive me the compensation payment. I'm on the edge." I looked directly into the desperate eyes of the man who was once my husband. His cowardice was repulsive. Even at the last moment, he could only beg for mercy instead of bravely facing the consequences of his actions. I shook my head. My face was as cold as ice. The verdict has been handed down. That is my money, earned by my sweat and blood, and I will not give up a single penny. You and your mother chose this path yourselves. When you were planning to exploit me and rob me of my father's inheritance, did you think about me being on the edge? Pay your dues. Michael. Live well, and I advise you not to ruin any other woman's life. With that, I turned decisively and walked away. I never looked back. His desperate cry was drowned out by the noise of the city traffic. I walked to my car and got behind the wheel. The car started smoothly. I turned on the music, and a cheerful spring melody filled the cabin. I confidently stepped on the gas, and the car sped forward, leaving the darkness of the past behind. The pain, the tears, and the betrayers. Ahead was the bridge over the river. My cozy apartment on the 20th floor, flooded with light, and my bookstore cafe, waiting for its opening. The bright sun shone through the windshield, reflecting the face of a strong, free, and happy woman. My new life was beginning at this very moment. Leaving behind the court's verdict and those who were paying for their boundless greed, I drove towards the light. A woman's fate ultimately depends on herself. To endure cruelty is to be cruel to oneself. Sacrifices are valuable only when they are justified, and true happiness begins the moment we find the courage to let go of the past to love ourselves. Thank you, dear listeners, for taking the time for this story. I wish you good health, peace in your family, and boundless happiness. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel to support us and hear many other interesting stories in the future. Goodbye and see you in the next videos.